Actually, for the Cleveland Cavaliers, they had a home. They're in the middle of a homestand actually right now. They took on the New Orleans Pelicans on Friday, beat the Dallas Mavericks yesterday, take on the Toronto Raptors, the #1 team in the Eastern Conference tomorrow. Matt, let's start with the game against the Pelicans. And first, let's start with LeBron James. A history-making performance for King James. His 867th straight double-digit scoring game, surpassing Michael Jordan for the all-time record. I don't want to say it's an obscure record, because any record that's held by Michael Jordan and then surpassed by LeBron James, it's hard to call obscure, but it is kind of one of those records that just kind of puts into perspective how ridiculous LeBron James's career has been.
No question about it. When you look to write about it or to talk about it, you don't even know how to say it properly without it becoming jumbled. Like most 10-point games, well, he's had a lot more than 10 points in most of these games. So how do you really say it? But the most consecutive double-digit performances in NBA history. Dang, I wish I would have thought about that on Friday. But just a phenomenal feat for him to do it 867 times. Now he's up to 868 after Sunday's win over the Mavericks.
It looked like he almost wasn't going to get there.
Yeah, he almost did. It almost broke one time after he the streak almost broke one game after he passed Michael, which would have been a little interesting.
Yeah.
But, taking a look at it, what he's been able to accomplish has been nothing short of magnificent. And he continues to talk about just being the kid from Akron who all the statistics were up against, growing up in the way that he did, single-parent household, bouncing from house to house, what he's been able to accomplish in his career and in his personal life as well, business world included. Just a phenomenal story, and if you plunked it down in front of our screenwriters in Hollywood, they would have told you it never could have happened, but reality is often better than a dream, and with LeBron, reality has been far better than any dream he could have ever hoped for.
Yeah, and he wound up with 27 points, 11 assists, and 9 rebounds. They needed every bit of that stat line against the Pelicans. They were down, I think, 13 points at halftime and rallied back. They took a lead into the fourth quarter. They're actually undefeated now, taking leads into the fourth quarter, which for a team that has had so many ups and downs throughout this season, they've had a handful of comebacks in those fourth quarters too, but it was a stellar performance by him on Friday. And they need these games, and he had a less than stellar performance yesterday against the Mavericks, although he did notch another triple-double. But these two games...
Must be nice to have a triple-double and for people to say, it was all right.
Yeah, well, he was like 5 of 23 shooting.
Well, what I thought was more interesting than that is his three-point shooting wasn't what was off.
Right.
He was 2 of 5 from long range. He was 3 of 18 from two-point range. LeBron is hardly ever that inconsistent when it comes to play inside the three-point arc.
Yeah.
Just a phenomenal statistic from yesterday's game, but they still found a way to pull it out.
And they need these games. I mean, they are only a half game over Philadelphia. It seems like they've been a half game over either Philadelphia or Washington or Indiana for like a month now for that 3 seed, which is incredible when you consider, one, they've won now, I think, 8 of their last 10 games. Or 8 of their last 9, and they've won 8 of 10 looking back. But they need these games because there's a big difference, I think, between that 3 seed and that 4 seed in the Eastern Conference playoffs. I know LeBron has said he's comfortable with whatever seed he winds up with, but it just seems so advantageous. If you have that 3 seed, you avoid Toronto until the Eastern Conference Finals. You potentially get a really nicked up Boston in the semifinals. That just seems to be the clearer path to what would be a 4th straight finals in the Eastern Conference.
LeBron knows that. He says it doesn't matter, but he knows that too.
Yeah.
He knows that if you get the 4 seed and you have to tangle with Toronto in the second round, it's going to be tough. It's also going to be tough if you have to get Philadelphia somewhere in there as well. And you want to have that home court advantage over Philadelphia. No matter what you do, you want to have home court for as long as possible. We know that if the Cavs get a top 4 seed, they'll at least have it for the first round. After that, it's basically a crapshoot whether they're going to get it again or not. They know what they have to do. This is a critical stretch for them because I believe out of the 5 games starting with the Pelicans, 4 of their opponents are either in the playoffs or in the position to be in the playoffs. And that will say a lot about the direction that this team is really heading, given the fact that they're sort of starting to get healthy again, but still haven't had the full complement of guys yet.
Yeah, they're actually in the middle of a 3-game stretch right now where it's Toronto, Washington, and then Philadelphia on Friday. That's a big matchup against Philadelphia in terms of potentially affecting the seeding. Philadelphia right now without Joel Embiid. And then they wrap up with home and home against the Knicks. So they have they've had this sort of easier stretch of their schedule here on the back end where they've been playing Brooklyn and Phoenix and Dallas and teams who aren't trying to win games right now.
Right. And they've struggled in that stretch at times, too.
They've struggled in that stretch, but then they have those 2 against the Knicks. But this 3-game stretch right here, this is going to go a long way toward determining that seeding. And, it's not even – for me, at least, it's not even about home court advantage. I don't worry about the Cavs with home court advantage. Like LeBron said, you feel comfortable with him going into any team's building and taking one of the first 2 and regaining that home court advantage. It's just that path where if you can play Boston in the second round rather than playing Toronto, at this point, with as nicked up as Boston is, it just seems so advantageous.
No question about it. Irving is going to be down for a little bit after getting scoped. Smart is not as healthy as the Celtics need him to be to have a long, consistent run in the playoffs. They don't have Gordon Hayward. They haven't for the last 70-some games. He only played like 6 minutes in the opener against the Cavs. So they're about as dinged up as you can get at this point in terms of their elite talent. And that's the thing that makes you question whether Boston has any type of run in them right now, because they are so banged up. When they get back on the floor, look, Kyrie, with his knee injury and his latest surgery, how good a shape can he realistically be in a 6-week stretch to get ready for the playoffs? His conditioning is going to be off because he's not going to be able to do as much cardio as he wants to do. He's not going to be able to run, so he's going to get winded. They're going to have a minute restriction for him. This is about the most disastrous scenario that could be for Boston, and it's also why when you look at how Ainge has built up this team, he thought they were 2 years away last year when they won the number 1 overall seed in the Eastern Conference. I still think they're at least a year away because they haven't played together for a full complement of games, and they cannot stay healthy.
Yeah, and they still have Gordon Hayward on the mend as well. And you look at the seeding for them, they're 2 games back of Toronto for that number 1 seed. They could conceivably get it, but they're either going to play probably Milwaukee or Miami. Those are no gimme series. For a team as nicked up as Boston, I mean, that could be a 7-2 upset easily. I don't even know from a betting odds standpoint, if Kyrie's not playing in that series, if Boston's even favored in it.
I wouldn't see how.
Yeah.
Because
especially against Milwaukee.
Milwaukee is so athletic and so gifted when it comes to getting the ball to the hoop or kicking it out that it is really going to be a slugfest of a series for the Celtics, regardless of who they play. But if it's Miami or Milwaukee, they've got their hands full, and it's going to be a tough sled to get through that first round.
And they could face either of those teams as the 1 or the 2 seed. And that's, I mean, you almost pick your poison, because I think Milwaukee might have the second best player in the Eastern Conference in Giannis. And then you look at Miami, they might be the best coach team in the East. What Eric Spoelstra has done with that team before Goran Dragic was named a replacement in the All-Star game, they didn't have an All-Star on their roster. And to get them back to the playoffs, obviously, we know what Dwayne Wade is capable of in limited doses. It's kind of going to be interesting if the Cavs ever match up with them, because we'll finally get that LeBron-Dwayne Wade series a little past Dwayne Wade's prime. And it does seem like the Cavs had the difficult conversation with Dwayne Wade that the Heat didn't want to have about moving to the bench and playing that role. As a sports writer, that would be a sports writer's dream, that series. But, I mean, it's going to be tough sledding for Boston. But right now, the Cavs are in a position where, look, I don't know if you can win all 3 of these games, but if you can take 2 of the 3 and then take care of business on the back end against New York, I think you're probably going to be pretty locked into that number 3 seed. And like we said, I mean, that is where they want to be.
It's all about handling your business.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with what the Columbus Blue Jackets are facing in the NHL standings right now. They have a game head-to-head against Pittsburgh. They need that game next week to solidify themselves not only as a playoff team but potentially improve their seeding. The Cavs are in the exact same boat. They need wins, especially over Philadelphia, over Washington, and Toronto too, to improve or at least solidify their seeding. They can't get higher than 3 at this point, but they can get lower, and they want to avoid that at all costs.
Yeah. I wanted to touch base on something else with that game against the Pelicans on Friday. George Hill, just when you think this team is getting healthy, just when Kevin Love returns from concussion protocol, of course, George Hill sprains an ankle in the third quarter. They bring in Jose Calderon, and I think they were at, like a 17-point advantage the rest of the way. I know you wrote about Jose today. I'll admit it. I am not wrong often about the Cleveland Cavaliers, so I'm glad when I am because it keeps me humble. I did not understand the Jose Calderon signing at all last summer, and he has proven to be a godsend for this team. He really is a guy who just fits into what they do. He brings the energy. He does everything that this team is seemingly missing at the right time, and he's just a great fit, too. The guy can stroke it. He is a great fit next to LeBron James.
We talked a lot about this signing, and we all kind of scratched our heads going,
I thought they should have
really
waived him rather than traded Richard Jefferson.
And a lot of people did. You're not alone.
I thought that was
regard.
just a cost-cutting move.
But when you look at this, what they've been able to do when he's on the floor, I mean, they're 22-9 when he starts.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty incredible for a guy who's 36, 12 years of NBA miles on him. So you would think there'd be a little bit of an ego. Mm-hmm. According to LeBron, there's no ego there. He said, and his exact quote after the Pelicans game was, every team needs a guy or two like him to be able to succeed long term, because he's just that glue guy that goes out there and hustles. I was watching the game with my father-in-law yesterday, and I watched Jose play, and the one thing that stood out was he's a more talented offensively version of Matthew Dellavedova. Yeah. He's tenacious on the defensive end. And look, he's going to give up plays. Everybody does. That's the NBA. But he's tenacious defensively. He can shoot the ball. And more importantly than that, he injects some enthusiasm and energy into the lineup. Yeah. And that cannot be understated for a team that has, at times, looked lackluster.
This kind of feeds into a question we just got from Joey. He says, who will make a nine-man rotation for the Cavs in the playoffs? You see the playoff rotation slim down. I think the Cavs will probably be in that 8 to 9 range. Maybe some guys will get, a short spurt here, and maybe it gets to 10. But I don't think you'll typically see more than 9 players play in the playoffs. So it'll be LeBron, Kevin Love, Larry Nance Jr., George Hill, presuming he's healthy.
Rodney Hood.
Clarkson
for sure. Tristan Thompson.
Kyle Korver. That's 8.
Kyle Korver has to play.
And that leaves J.R. Smith is 9 if he's going to be in that rotation.
And I wouldn't think that he would not be, because as of late he's seen him found himself again. Yeah. But it's going to be interesting how these minutes get divvied up. And I do not envy Larry Drew. I do not envy Tyronn Lue and how they have to put this playoff roster, this rotation together. Jose Calderon may not play in the first series, and he may be a stud in the Eastern Conference semifinals. It's the same thing with Channing Frye a couple of years ago. He lit it up against the Atlanta Hawks, didn't play hardly a minute against the Golden State Warriors. It all depends on matchups, but you have to believe that at some point Jose Calderon will play meaningful playoff minutes for this Cavs team. Is he going to be in the permanent rotation? No. But he is going to play a critical role, and if they have any sort of backcourt injury, he's right there.
And I think from a matchup standpoint, too, that's going to determine Tristan's minutes, really. Right. How often do you play LeBron at the 4 and Love at the 5 and mix Drew in there? There are a lot of ways they can go. I think there will be series where Tristan is kind of the odd man out. He'll play, but I don't know what the minutes will look like. There could be somewhere it's JR. That's a lot of guys have played for this team. A lot of guys have contributed for this team. You're right. The coaches are not in an enviable position, but
in a way, it's a good thing.
Oh yeah, this is as deep of a team as they've had.
I know it's weird because we talk about this guy.
It's just not as top heavy.
This guy might not crack the rotation. Well, in past years, we're like, do we have any guys that could fill the rotation? Like, it's so weird, the dichotomy.
Mike Miller and James Jones in that 2015 playoff run.
All due respect to JJ and Mike, I like them both as people.
I was a big Mike Miller fan.
When they got on the court at the latter stages of their career, I got a little nervous just because defensively it wasn't there for them. But it's a good problem to have. Like you said, it's not as top-heavy as they have been with Kyrie, with LeBron, and with K-Love. but it's as deep as they've been since they started this run when LeBron came back. I don't think anybody can question that 1 through 10, this is as solid a team as the Cavaliers have had since LeBron's first go-around with the team.
Yeah. And then the other player I wanted to mention from that Pelicans game was Jordan Clarkson. He had 23 points off the bench.
Yeah.
He is the kind of guy who is going to give you – he could be a lot like, I think, JR in those 2015 playoffs where he was that spark for the Cavs and really keeps defenses honest. He's instant offense. Larry Drew compared him to Ben Gordon, the former Sixth Man of the Year, after that game. Jordan Clarkson is a guy, he wasn't the biggest name they acquired at that trade deadline, but if he can continue to carve out his role with this team, it's going to be a very meaningful role moving forward.
He's the second best bench scorer in the league.
Right.
I mean, this guy can come into any game and seemingly get you 10 points in a hiccup.
Yeah.
He really is that good. When he is on a roll, it's pretty fun to watch, and trust me, it's hell to defend. And more importantly than just putting the ball in the hoop, putting multiple times, putting it in a couple times, and putting that doubt into the head of a defender is even more important. If we get into a series where we're watching the Cavs and the Raptors, and Clarkson comes off the bench and torches DeRozan or Lowry, that's going to turn the tide of the entire series.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And then you mentioned Jordan Clarkson, what he's able to do off the bench. It's probably too late for him to make a run at Sixth Man of the Year.
Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about LeBron James and his MVP candidacy because that's kind of the big storyline going around right now. LeBron told the Associated Press after the Cavs lost to Miami last week that if he had an MVP vote, he would vote for himself, and that seems to have sparked a conversation. And people are starting to look at LeBron James' resume against James Harden's resume. James Harden right now looks like he is the clear-cut front runner for this year's MVP award. I think he's going to win it, but LeBron has an opportunity, I think, here with the games they have and the stage they're on in this next week. If the Cavs can somehow get to 50 wins with everything they've been through this season, that might be enough of passing the threshold where you don't look at the Cavs roster anymore as a hindrance to LeBron's MVP candidacy.
It's so weird to think that he can do all the great things that he's done. And he's won 4 MVP championships?
4, yeah. 2 with the Cavs, 2 with the Heat.
He literally could have won almost any given year over the last decade.
Yep, he's been the best player in the league since 2006. I firmly believe that.
There's no question about that. And you don't take playoffs into consideration, otherwise he'd run away with it every single year. But you look at what he was able to do with this Cavs team this year, given the fact that they've had, we've got to sit down and count the man games missed.
Yeah.
Because it probably numbers in the hundreds for all the guys that they have had miss significant time. But LeBron has played for the first time in his career all 77 games to this point, is in line to play in all 82. Likely will probably play in 81.
Oh, I think he's going to play in 82.
You think?
No, I think he wants to. I think it's been a source of pride. I really do. I think it's been a source of pride for him this season.
I know that if it won't be much against the Knicks,
he'll
game,
get those 10 points.
But he'll get in.
They might need that game though for playoff seeding.
That's the thing. If it means something, he will play significant minutes.
And they need him. They're not in any position where they can take him off the court, even against a tanking team like the Knicks.
I know.
And think that they're going to win that game.
They're not good. I don't want to say that they're not good enough.
They're certainly not prepared for it.
But they're not ready for it.
Right.
Because they've had their leader the whole year.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like a couple years ago where he had to take a 2.5 week break to get his back and his knees healthy. They have had him literally every time they've stepped onto the floor this year. And when your leader goes down, a guy you depend on every night, your mindset is a lot different. Jose Calderon even mentioned it. He's like, look, at any given night, it's one guy who really does well and one guy who steps up when somebody else, is hurt or doesn't play up to snuff. And that was in reference to Kevin Love's struggles against the Pelicans, where he really struggled offensively. But Jose brought up a good point. Look, there's one guy on this team, you don't have to worry about consistency.
Yeah.
And he looked to the locker to his right, and he kind of gave everybody the head nod like, y'all know who that is. But, literally, LeBron is the model of consistency for this franchise. He scores points. He hands out assists. He goes after rebounds. He gets in the passing lane. He blocks shots when he has to. It's so difficult to imagine what this team would be like without him, that you have to take that into account if you're an MVP voter. Otherwise, you're not being fair to the player.
Yeah, I just think you look at, one, the Rockets added a Hall of Fame point guard in Chris Paul this year, while the Cavs lost their all-star point guard in Kyrie Irving. LeBron, I think, is going to wind up playing like 9 or 10 more games than James Harden, which is not necessarily an insignificant margin.
Right.
You mentioned, LeBron only has 4 MVPs, and I think a lot of people agree, at the very least, he should have 5. He probably should have won that one Derrick Rose one, but he was being punished for the decision by voters. There are... like the year Steph Curry won them, I understood it because Steph Curry had these absurd stat lines, was playing on a 73-win team. The Warriors were far and away the best team in the league. Last year, I actually liked James Harden's argument more than I liked Russell Westbrook's, but that's another debate. I thought LeBron had a stronger argument last year than he got credit for, although I understand why he didn't win MVP. This year, you look at it, and LeBron has better stats. He's more important to his team, and he's clearing a higher bar of expectation. People expect more out of LeBron James than they expect that out of James Harden. Right. And LeBron's clearing that bar.
Right. He's almost a victim of his own success in the fact that he's put his level of play up so high that if he doesn't exceed a ridiculous level, he's done.
And he is.
And he's still playing. He's 15 years in the league, and we're still having the conversation of whether he's the best basketball player. And it's a really short conversation.
Oh, I think everybody agrees
he
he's the best player. It's just a matter of, is he the MVP? And that means different things to different people.
I know people hedge on that, and they're like, okay, he's the player of the year, but is he really the most valuable player?
Right.
I understand the dichotomy there because you can be the most valuable player and not be the best player.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of a mislabeled award. A player of the year is a lot different. Bottom line is LeBron is still the most valuable asset in the NBA to his team. If you take Steph Curry off the Warriors, or you keep him on the Warriors and you take Kevin Durant off the Warriors, they still have a hell of a nucleus. You take LeBron off the Cavs, we're flirting with futility all over again.
Yeah, I go back to, I remember in 2013, LeBron James was one vote away from being the first ever unanimous MVP. And it was Gary Washburn, I believe, of the Boston Globe, who voted for Carmelo because he said if you take LeBron off the Heat, they're still a playoff team. If you take Carmelo off the Knicks, they're a lottery team. I don't know if Gary Washburn still has an MVP vote or not. I don't know if he's still at the Boston Globe. If he is, and he does still have a vote, I hope he votes for LeBron James using that logic. That's all I can say.
I hope so because it's applicable to this year.
Yes.
I mean, if you take LeBron off the Cavs, there's no doubt that they're flirting with the lottery.
And they might win 50 games if they win 4 of the next 5 here.
Three more. They need
3
more wins to get 50.
Yeah, they're probably going to win 50 games here.
You would think.
Yeah, we'll see. But that's going to do it for today's 3-point play. He's Matt Florjancic. I'm Ben Axelrod. We'll have you covered on the Cavs and the Browns and the Indians all throughout the week, and some WrestleMania mixed in as well.
Right.
So a lot going on here in the Cleveland sports scene. But that's going to do it for today's show. Thanks for watching on Facebook Live.